Actually, we can speak to our own Oubai Shahbandar for some further analysis. He joins me now here in the studio while we're watching these leaders take their place on the stage for that NATO family photo. Oubai, I mean, give us a sense of what you think the atmosphere actually is like. I mean, after everything that's happened in the last 2 days. You know, yesterday we heard EU Council President Donald Tusk basically say, United States, watch yourself. You don't have that many friends as it is. We did hear Jens Stoltenberg bring down a bit of the tension by saying, hey, United States, we hear you. We know we need to increase some of our spending. But still, this is a pretty unpredictable summit from here on out, if I can put it that way.
It's really been an interesting summit already, and we're looking at this family photo, and with at NATO and Brussels, and with all families, there's going to be tension, there's going to be some dysfunction, there's going to be some infighting, and we're really seeing a showdown here in Brussels in the 2018 NATO summit. President Trump in front of live cameras, live TV, taking Jens Stoltenberg to task for Germany not paying its share, really bringing up the issue of Nord Stream 2, the multi-billion-dollar gas project that will see potentially billions of euros from Germany to Russia at a time when Germany is not paying its 2% share to NATO. President Trump brought that up in front of the whole world at the very beginning of the summit, really setting the tone for the rest of the summit. Jens Stoltenberg trying to be diplomatic, attempting to really keep the alliance together. We saw that in his speech, but certainly some tensions here, particularly with Germany. And we saw Chancellor Merkel's response saying that, telling the media that, well, Germany is independent of Russia, that she lived during the Soviet occupation of Germany. Unfortunately, though, we have the former German Chancellor, Gerhard Schröder, who's working for the Russian gas project that President Trump brought up. So perhaps there's a method to the madness here, as it were, as President Trump is trying to get Germany, the biggest European economy, to pay 2% of its GDP to defense spending at a time when the U.S. military has 2 brigade combat teams in Italy and in Germany and rotates another combat brigade in Eastern Europe on a 9-month rotation. So President Trump also playing to the base back home to the U.S., trying to say that, hey, the U.S. pays a lot of money for NATO and European defense spending, and we want to see the Europeans pay their fair share. That, of course, plays very well for a domestic audience in the United States. Germany, not too happy with it.
I mean, Oubai, you just said, Trump is very good at playing to his base back home, but we just saw the Senate actually vote almost unanimously, Oubai, 97-2, to vow to continue U.S. support for NATO. So Trump can be playing to his base, but when Congress stands completely against everything Trump has said to criticize NATO, where does that leave him?
Well, that was a very interesting vote by the Senate. It was a non-binding resolution, but it was a pretty resounding voice of the Senate saying that, hey, we support NATO, we stand by NATO. They want to reassure the NATO allies that the United States isn't going to pull out from NATO anytime soon. That happening right as President Trump was heading to Belgium. I don't think I've ever seen anything like that before a major international summit. But essentially, NATO really has been at the linchpin of the American transatlantic alliance in the post-World War II era, where the European allies are looking for massive American military with bases throughout Europe to provide that security fundamental base for Europe. And frankly, at the end of the day, it's also to provide a strategic deterrence to Russia at a time when particularly Eastern Europe, Poland, Ukraine, the Baltic states, and even Norway are worried about a very effective Russian hybrid warfare that we've seen employed throughout the recent years. So they're looking for NATO, and particularly the American deployed forces in Eastern Europe to provide that strategic deterrence to Russia. Even Poland is potentially looking at a $2 billion permanent American military base that they want on their territory to provide a deterrence against Russia. We'll see whether or not that happens after the summit.
Okay. Oubai, we're going to leave it there for now. We will, of course, though, be back at the top of the hour with full coverage of this contentious NATO summit about to get underway. No, I'm being told, actually, we can take more time now. We'll just go straight into the top of the hour then, Oubai. So, there is a little bit of irony here because while the U.S. complains about its military being the biggest, in NATO by a huge margin, carrying too much of the weight for the organization. Trump had already domestically said that he was going to invest more in the U.S. military, that he wanted to see the U.S. military boosted. So it's funny that he's saying he's going to invest in strengthening the U.S. military. He's telling NATO that he doesn't want to do as much of the work, to carry as big of a military responsibility.
Well, this is the biggest defense budget in the world here in the United States, over $600 billion. That's essentially more than the defense budget of all the major military powers in the world combined, if you can imagine. The U.S. spends around 4% of that budget in European defense spending in NATO, providing for its military bases in Europe and for the 4 combat brigades that are stationed in Italy and Germany, and like I said, rotating in Eastern Europe. Now, what's interesting here is that even the smaller European economies like Estonia and Greece are actually paying their 2% share of their GDP for defense spending, and that was a major talking point brought up by President Trump as he sat down with the NATO Secretary General this morning, telling him, hey, you have these other countries in Europe paying their 2%. Why can't Europe's largest economy pay its fair share? Germany's Minister of Defense, Ursula von der Leyen, has responded by saying, well, look, Germany is deploying its forces with NATO. You had German forces in Afghanistan, although many experts really question just how effective German forces in Afghanistan were, especially at a time when actually American military forces ended up replacing the German contingent in northern Afghanistan a few years back. So a lot of